A federal appeals court has just declared President Trump's emergency tariff plan illegal, shaking the foundations of presidential authority over trade. The ruling challenges the administration's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs without Congress's explicit approval. At stake is the separation of powers. Can a president reshape the nation's economic relationships unilaterally? The world is watching, as this decision could unravel a trade strategy that's disrupted supply chains and redefined alliances. The court's August 29 decision told the White House there are limits to its authority, even under national security. For businesses and consumers, the ruling offers hope that unpredictable, unilateral tariffs may soon end. Yet, the tariffs remain in place for now, pending a Supreme Court review this month. This legal drama began with VOS Selections, a small importer led by Victor Schwartz, who argued the president overstepped constitutional bounds. The appeals court sided with Schwartz, turning a business dispute into a historic constitutional showdown. The case now before the Supreme Court will set a precedent that could empower or constrain presidents for generations. The nation holds its breath as the balance of power in American government hangs in the balance. To understand this crisis, we must examine the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. Enacted in 1977, IEEPA lets the president regulate international commerce during a declared emergency, originally for threats like terrorism. The Trump administration used IEEPA as a blunt instrument, imposing sweeping tariffs globally by claiming economic competition was a national security threat. The so-called Liberation Day tariffs set a baseline of 10% on most imports, with some rates over 100%. The administration argued these tariffs protected American industries and national security, marking a sharp break from decades of free trade policy. IEEPA allowed the White House to bypass Congress, making it the ideal tool for a unilateral trade war. Supporters say economic security is inseparable from national security, and the president needs broad tools to respond to threats. Critics warn this is executive overreach, setting a precedent for any president to impose taxes by declaring an economic emergency. Legal scholars argue this sidesteps Congress's constitutional duty to regulate commerce and levy taxes. The stage was set for a legal battle over the limits of presidential power. The legal challenge to IEEPA tariffs culminated in a landmark federal appeals court ruling on August 29, 2025. In a 7-4 decision, the court rebuked the administration's legal theory, drawing a sharp line between regulating commerce and imposing taxes. The majority found that IEEPA does not grant the president the power to impose tariffs. Taxation is Congress's domain. The court said Congress never intended IEEPA as a blank check for taxing imports. Neil Katyal, representing the plaintiffs, urged the president to seek congressional approval for trade policies. The court allowed tariffs to remain temporarily, giving the administration time to appeal to the Supreme Court. The White House quickly signaled its intent to fight on, confident the Supreme Court would vindicate its position. The split decision highlights deep legal divisions and sets the stage for a dramatic Supreme Court showdown. The outcome will define the boundaries of executive power in trade for years to come. As of November 25, 2025, the nation is in limbo. The tariffs remain, despite being ruled illegal, while the Supreme Court prepares to rule. This uncertainty clouds the economy. Businesses can't plan, importers face unpredictable costs, and consumers pay higher prices. The White House projects confidence, insisting the president acted within his authority and expects victory. Yet behind the scenes, officials prepare for possible defeat, even as they negotiate trade truces, like the recent agreement with China. The Congressional Budget Office recently slashed its tariff revenue projections by $1 trillion, reflecting the policy's waning fiscal impact. Exemptions and shifting trade patterns have watered down the tariff's effectiveness. The CBO report raises questions about both the legality and the real-world impact of the tariffs. The nation waits for the Supreme Court's decision, which will determine the future of U.S. trade policy. Publicly, the White House exudes confidence, but privately, officials are preparing for a Supreme Court loss. A Plan B is in the works. If IEEPA is struck down, the administration will try to reimpose tariffs using other trade laws, like Section 301 and Section 232. These alternatives are slower and more cumbersome, lacking EPA's speed and flexibility. The administration's determination to keep tariffs as a policy tool reveals the political and ideological stakes. Allies argue that losing EPA weakens America's ability to respond to economic threats. Even if the Supreme Court rules against the administration, the trade wars may continue in a more complicated piecemeal fashion. Plan B could trigger new, legal battles and further instability in global trade. Beyond Washington, the tariffs hit American families directly, acting as a broad tax and driving up prices on everyday goods. Food prices surged 40% year-over-year in September 2025, sparking public outrage and forcing the administration to reverse some agricultural tariffs. Executive orders rolled back duties on key staples like beef, tomatoes, coffee, and bananas, offering some relief but underscoring the tariffs' impact on the cost of living. The pain extends to cars, appliances, and nearly every retail sector, with small businesses especially hard hit. Victor Schwartz, the importer who sued, had to lay off staff due to the tariffs' crushing costs. The administration floated a $2,000 tariff dividend for families, but economists dismissed it as a gimmick that wouldn't offset higher prices. Most experts warn the broader economic damage. Higher costs, disrupted supply chains, and foreign retaliation far outweighs any potential benefits. For many, a theoretical dividend can't make up for real price hikes at the checkout. The tariff's impact is felt in every household, fueling the national debate over trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision will determine whether this pain continues or relief is on the way. The Trump administration's tariffs have strained America's global relationships, often leaving the U.S. isolated. Bypassing international bodies like the WTO, the U.S. has been seen as unpredictable and aggressive, prompting other nations to form new alliances. At the G20 summit in South Africa, President Trump's absence symbolized America's go-it-alone approach, while other leaders moved forward without the U.S. Tensions with the EU remain high, with steep tariffs on European steel and aluminum tied to digital regulation demands. The EU has so far refused to concede, keeping the relationship tense despite a recent trade agreement. With China, years of tit-for-tat tariffs led to a recent truce, marked by a phone call between Trump and Xi and a planned visit to Beijing. The relationship remains fragile, with deep disagreements on trade, technology, and Taiwan. The Supreme Court's decision could weaken U.S. leverage in ongoing negotiations. America's unilateral approach has diminished its influence, forcing allies and rivals alike to adapt. The world is watching to see if the U.S. will return to cooperation or double down on confrontation. The fallout from the tariff plan has ignited fierce debate among legal and economic experts. Many legal scholars see the administration's use of IEEPA as dangerous overreach, while others argue presidents need broad tools in a world where economic and national security are linked. Economists largely criticize the tariffs, pointing to surging prices and disrupted supply chains as evidence of harm to consumers. The proposed $2,000 tariff dividend is widely dismissed as unworkable. The White House's Plan B faces skepticism. Alternative statutes are more limited and legally complex than EPA. Experts warn that even if the administration tries to continue tariffs through other means, it will face years of litigation and uncertainty. There's no easy substitute for the sweeping power IEEPA provided. The debate centers on the proper limits of presidential power and the future of American trade. The Supreme Court's imminent decision is about more than tariffs. It's a defining moment for American trade policy and the balance of power. If the court upholds the administration, presidential power will expand dramatically, allowing future presidents to impose tariffs by emergency decree. If the court strikes down the plan, it reasserts Congress's authority and checks the executive branch. The outcome will affect prices, jobs, and America's global relationships. At its core, the case asks, do we want checks and balances, or a president with sweeping emergency powers? The decision will shape the economic and constitutional landscape for decades. As citizens, it's crucial to understand what's at stake and stay engaged. The Supreme Court's verdict will echo far beyond this tariff plan, marking a new chapter in the story of American power.